My husband divorced me by text message and took everything from our joint account. Imagine waking up one morning, thinking it's just another day only to get a text message that changes your life forever. My husband, he dumped me over text, left me for a younger woman, drained our joint account, thought he had won, thought I'd be broken. But what he didn't know, I had seen it coming. And while he was planning his escape, I was preparing his downfall. What happened next? Let's just say, he never saw it coming. Keep watching because trust me, you don't want to miss this. I was standing behind the glass counter of my jewelry boutique, adjusting a delicate diamond necklace under the soft glow of the showroom lights when my phone buzzed against the counter. The store was busy, as always, women chatting excitedly over engagement rings, the occasional sharp glint of gold catching the light as my employees worked seamlessly, offering assistance with that warm, effortless grace I'd trained them to have. This boutique wasn't just a store to me, it was my empire, built from the ground up, piece by painstaking piece. Every display, every carefully curated collection, every satisfied client walking out with a velvet-wrapped box, it all represented my years of hard work. A decade of late nights, early mornings, and sacrifices. My store was thriving, my life was thriving, and nothing could shake that. Or so I thought. I wiped my hands on my silk blouse before reaching for my phone, fully expecting a message from a supplier or maybe one of my designers. But the moment I saw the name flashing on my screen, a strange stillness settled over me. Nathan. My husband. My stomach tensed slightly, but not from fear. No, this wasn't the kind of marriage where you got excited when your husband texted you in the middle of the day. Ours had become something else, an unspoken arrangement. A quiet Cold War masked by dinner parties and polite conversations. I exhaled, thumb swiping across the screen, and the second my eyes scanned the message, the world around me seemed to slow. I'm leaving you, moving to LA with Jessica. I've already emptied our joint account. Enjoy your little business. Haha. I blinked. Once. Twice. The words sat there, static, unchanging, but my mind took a full 3 seconds to process them. And then nothing. No rush of panic. No sharp, gut-wrenching pain. Just a slow inhale. A heartbeat, steady and unfazed. Nathan was leaving me. Not a shock. I had seen the signs, his sudden gym obsession. The expensive new suits that didn't quite match his typical office attire. The way he'd come home just a little too late with flimsy excuses about work meetings. And Jessica? I let out a breathy, humorless chuckle. That was almost too predictable. Jessica was 23, fresh-faced, wide-eyed, an eager and intern turned receptionist at his company. I had met her once at a Christmas party. She had been polite, all bubbly smiles and enthusiastic nods, but I had noticed the way she leaned just a little too close. When Nathan spoke, the way her laugh came too quickly, too readily. She thought she was winning something. She thought she was different. But the part that did make my fingers curl slightly against the cool glass countertop? The money. I've already emptied our joint account. Ah, there it was. That was where he thought he had won. A customer called for assistance, an older woman admiring a sapphire pendant. I smiled, my expression smooth as polished glass, and walked over, helping her choose the perfect piece, wrapping it carefully in my boutique's signature black and gold packaging. I thanked her warmly, and only when she left did I return my gaze to my phone, fingers hovering over the screen. I could have responded with rage, with heartbreak, with desperate pleading. But none of those emotions sat right with me. They didn't belong to me. Not anymore. Instead, I simply typed back, "Good luck." I locked my phone, set it back on the counter, and continued my day as if nothing had happened. Nathan had no idea. He thought I would be devastated, crumbling into a heap of tears and sorrow, begging him to reconsider. He had always underestimated me, always assumed I was the safe, predictable wife who would always be there, who would always endure. He didn't realize that the moment I first suspected him, I had begun preparing for this exact scenario. 6 months ago, I had found a crumpled receipt from a 5-star hotel, dated on a night he had claimed to be working late at the office. I had tucked it away, saying nothing. 3 weeks later, I had caught a glimpse of his phone screen when he wasn't paying attention, Jessica's name lighting up, followed by a message that read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Miss you." I had felt something cold settle in my chest then. Not heartbreak, but something closer to clarity. That was the moment I knew. The very next day, I had walked into a different bank, opened a new account in my name only, and begun moving my personal savings. I hadn't rushed. It had to be careful, deliberate, every move calculated. I left just enough in the joint account to keep up appearances, just enough to ensure Nathan never suspected what I was doing. While he had been sneaking off to his little secret rendezvous, I had been collecting evidence, bank statements, credit card charges, hotel reservations, dinner receipts from places he had never taken me, and I had consulted a lawyer weeks ago, a sharp woman with a reputation for dismantling men like Nathan with a single legal motion. And now, he thought he had blindsided me. He thought he had pulled off the ultimate betrayal, the perfect escape. Another message arrived. "Don't bother begging. Jessica and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Jessica." The poor girl probably thought she had won some kind of prize, that she was special, that Nathan was hers now, that they were about to embark on some grand, romantic adventure. I almost pitied her. Almost. Instead of responding, I picked up my phone and dialed a number saved under attorney. "It's time," I said calmly. "My lawyer didn't even hesitate. The papers are ready. I'll file them first thing tomorrow. Do you want me to have him served in LA?" I allowed myself a small, knowing smile. "No rush," I said smoothly. "Let him think he's won first." Nathan's next message arrived minutes later. "I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger, after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." "Little shop," I laughed. A real, deep, genuine laugh. My little shop generated more income than Nathan's middle management salary ever had. But, of course, he had never truly understood it. He had never respected what I built, what I had sacrificed to make it successful. Let him think what he wanted. Let him gloat. He had no idea about the certified letters waiting for him in LA, or the financial lockdown that would freeze every asset we shared. He didn't know that by emptying our joint account, he had unknowingly committed a financial offense that would be used against him in court. He didn't realize that I had kept meticulous records, that I had documented every red flag, every suspicious transaction. Tonight, Nathan would go to sleep feeling victorious. Tomorrow, he would wake up to a reality he never saw coming, and that was just the beginning. I barely slept that night. Not because I was heartbroken, not because I was in shock, but because my mind was razor sharp, alert, alive. Every detail, every carefully laid plan, every single piece of this puzzle had to fit perfectly. I lay there in the quiet of my bedroom now, not ours, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what was about to unfold. Nathan thought he was the one in control. He thought he had the upper hand, that he had blindsided me, stolen my money, humiliated me, and walked away without consequences. But what he didn't know, what he could never have predicted, was that I had been preparing for this moment for 6 months. And now it was time to execute. The first real confirmation had come on a Tuesday night, in the form of a crumpled hotel receipt wedged between the seats of his car. I hadn't been looking for anything that evening. I had simply borrowed his car to pick up a shipment for the boutique. But when I dropped my phone and reached down to retrieve it, my fingers brushed against the glossy slip of paper. I pulled it out, expecting something meaningless, a fast food receipt, maybe, or a dry cleaning ticket. But the words Sunset Lux Hotel, $547.89 stared back at me in neat, printed font. The date was 3 nights ago. I hadn't confronted him. I hadn't screamed, accused, or cried. Instead, I had taken a deep breath, slipped the receipt into my purse, and started planning. The next morning, I made my first move. I walked into a different bank, opened a new personal account, and began transferring my savings. I was meticulous, careful, patient. I didn't empty our joint account. I left just enough for everyday expenses, just enough for him to believe I was still oblivious. Nathan had always underestimated me, always assumed I was too busy, too trusting, too wrapped up in my work to notice the little details. And maybe, once upon a time, I had been, but not anymore. A week later, I hired a private investigator, a quiet, unassuming man named Paul, recommended by a lawyer friend. We met at a small cafe, where I slid him an envelope containing everything I had already collected: bank statements, screenshots of suspicious late-night texts, and, of course, the hotel receipt. Paul glanced over the documents, then looked up at me with a knowing expression. "You want proof," he said, more a statement than a question. "I want everything," I confirmed. "And Nathan?" He made it so damn easy. Within a week, Paul had photos grainy but unmistakable. Nathan, sitting across from Jessica at an upscale restaurant, laughing, leaning in too close, his hand grazing hers. Another set of photos, Nathan leading Jessica into the very same hotel he had claimed was just a place to crash after work. And then, the piece de resistance, a receipt for a diamond bracelet, bought from a high-end store using our joint credit card. That was when I called the lawyer. She was a sharp woman in her mid-40s, a powerhouse in a tailored black suit, with a reputation for tearing men like Nathan apart in court. When I sat across from her in her sleek downtown office, she barely glanced at the thick folder of evidence before giving me a satisfied smirk. "You have him," she said simply. "This will be fun." We discussed every angle: financial misconduct, infidelity, asset protection, legal consequences. She advised me on what to do next: transfer the last of my funds, secure my business assets, and most importantly, stay quiet. Let Nathan believe he had won. Let him walk into his own demise without realizing it. So I did. I played my role perfectly. When he sent that smug little text, "I'm leaving you, moving to LA with Jessica. I've already emptied our joint account. Enjoy your little business." Ha ha. He thought it was the final blow. He thought I was sitting at home, devastated, broken. But instead, I was at my boutique, sipping an espresso, waiting for the real game to begin. The morning after his text, I woke up early. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, not in our kitchen mine now, and settled into the leather chair in my home office. The first call was to my lawyer. "It's time," I told her, my voice steady. She exhaled sharply, almost in amusement. "Already ahead of you, filing the papers today." The second call was to the bank. "Hello, I'd like to report unauthorized transactions on my joint account." "Yes, a large withdrawal. No, I did not approve it. I'd also like to remove my husband as an authorized user." The bank rep was professional, but I could hear the faint edge of satisfaction in her tone. "Of course, ma'am. We'll begin the investigation immediately." Nathan thought he had emptied our account, but he hadn't. By withdrawing that money, he had unknowingly committed financial fraud. And that would come back to bite him. By midday, I was at my boutique, watching as customers filtered in and out, completely unfazed. Nathan was probably packing his bags, thinking he was stepping into his new life, with no idea that every card he planned to use was about to be declined. And then the text came, "Don't bother begging. Jessica and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later." I smirked, fingers hovering over my screen. I could have said so many things. "Oh, Nathan, you have no idea." But instead, I just let him believe his own illusion. By late afternoon, I had a message from Paul, my private investigator. "Thought you'd enjoy this. Nathan and Jessica booked first-class flights to LA and a luxury hotel. Used your joint credit card. Want to handle it?" I laughed. Oh, this was going to be satisfying. I picked up the phone and called the credit card company. Yes, I'd like to report fraudulent charges. I listed them off 2 first-class tickets, an expensive hotel stay. The agent assured me the charges would be canceled immediately, and that the card would be shut down. Perfect. I pictured it Nathan and Jessica arriving at the airport, smug, ready for their grand escape, stepping up to the counter, handing over their tickets, only to be told denied. Invalid. The hotel, gone. Reservation, erased. And the best part? Nathan would check his account, scrambling, only to find nothing. He thought he had stolen my money, but I had stolen his future. By the time I closed up the boutique that evening, I was calm, collected. Nathan thought this was over, but tomorrow, he would wake up in his worst nightmare. And this was only the beginning. Nathan thought he had outsmarted me, thought he could steal my money, cheat on me, and start a new life without consequences. But what happens when the tables turn? What happens when the woman he underestimated becomes his worst nightmare? I had been planning my next move for months, and it was time to strike. Do you think he'll realize what's happening before it's too late? Comment 111 if you think he'll fight back. Comment 222 what if you think he's about to lose everything. Let's see if you can predict how this ends. The morning after Nathan's text, I woke up to the kind of silence that used to feel suffocating. But today it felt different, liberating. I stretched, rolling my shoulders, feeling a tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying start to dissipate. Nathan was gone, finally. For the first time in a long time, there was no need to tiptoe around his moods, no cold glances across the breakfast table, no fake smiles when he came home late reeking of someone else's perfume. He thought he had walked away with everything. My money, my trust, my stability. He thought he had won. But what he didn't know, what he would be realizing very, very soon, was that I had been waiting for this day for months. And now, it was my turn. I took my time getting ready, slipping into a fitted black blazer over my silk blouse, my go-to look when I needed to feel powerful. My reflection in the mirror was calm, composed, but my eyes held something new, a quiet, knowing fire. Nathan had always loved to call me predictable, boring. "You never take risks, Evelyn," he'd say with that smug little smirk. "You're too careful, too structured," as if stability was a flaw, as if the very traits that had made me successful, independent, untouchable were weaknesses. Well, let's see how predictable he thought I was after today. By the time I arrived at my boutique, the city was already wide awake, the streets bustling with early shoppers and business owners setting up for the day. My employees greeted me warmly, none of them aware of the storm brewing just beyond the glass doors. To them, I was the same Evelyn I had always been, poised, professional, in control. And that was exactly the way I wanted it. I checked my watch. If my timing was right, and it always was, Nathan and Jessica would be at the airport right about now. I imagined it perfectly. Nathan, rolling his expensive leather suitcase up to the first-class counter, flashing that entitled smirk as he handed over his boarding pass. The attendant scanning it, frowning, scanning it again. The slight shift in Nathan's posture as she types something into her computer. The first flicker of confusion crossing his face when she says, "I'm sorry, sir, but your ticket is invalid." Jessica, standing beside him, shifting uncomfortably, trying to maintain her enthusiasm. "What do you mean invalid?" she asks, her voice just a little too high, a little too sharp. Nathan, already irritated, pulling out his phone to check his emails, muttering about incompetence, completely oblivious to the fact that this isn't a mistake. I could almost hear his voice in my head, snapping at the poor airline employee. "That's impossible. Check again." But the response would be the same. No ticket, no first-class upgrade, no flight to and that was just the beginning. The next move was even sweeter. His credit card, the one he had so confidently used to book their luxury hotel, declined. Again, and again, and again. Jessica's smile faltering, her excitement fading into frustration. Nathan, what's going on? And then the final piece of the puzzle. The moment when he realizes that his bank account, the one he thought he had emptied before I could react, is frozen. The weight of that realization sinking in. The dawning horror that he isn't in control anymore. I sipped my coffee, letting the rich taste linger on my tongue as I imagined the chaos unfolding on the other side of the city. He was probably calling me by now, probably leaving voicemail after voicemail, demanding explanations, cursing me, begging me to fix it. I wouldn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I focused on my morning meeting, going over sales numbers, approving new inventory. My boutique was thriving, something Nathan had never fully understood. He had dismissed it for years, called it a hobby, a side project, never realizing it made more money than his entire salary. My assistant knocked on the office door, poking her head in. "Morning, Evelyn. You have a call on line 1. It's Nathan?" I guessed, raising an eyebrow. Her hesitation confirmed it. I shook my head, smiling. "Let it go to voicemail." She grinned. "Got it." By noon, I had 12 missed calls and 5 voicemails from Nathan, each one more desperate than the last. I played them in order, leaning back in my chair, enjoying every second. The first was exactly what I expected: arrogance, annoyance, pure entitlement. "Evelyn, what the hell did you do?" "My card's not working." "Fix it. Now." The second? Frustration. "This is ridiculous. You need to call the bank and reverse whatever you did." By the third, the panic was setting in. "Okay, this isn't funny anymore. We're stranded here. Call me back." The fourth? Pure desperation. "Jesus, Evelyn, just talk to me. I don't have time for this. Jessica is freaking out." And the last one? The one that made every ounce of patience, every second of planning, completely worth it? A quiet, broken whisper. "You win." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that sink in. Yes, I did. But this was only step 1. Nathan thought this was just about the money, just about inconvenience. He had no idea what was coming next, because while he was scrambling, desperately trying to put out fires, I was lighting new ones. By the end of the day, his office would be receiving an anonymous tip, a full report detailing his affair with Jessica, complete with receipts. By the end of the week, his employer would launch an internal investigation. And if I knew anything about corporate HR, they wouldn't like what they found. Nathan had spent our entire marriage thinking he was untouchable. But today he was learning a very different lesson. And I was just getting started. The moment I turned off Nathan's voicemails, I knew I had him exactly where I wanted. His panic, his desperation, it was the first real taste of consequences he had ever experienced. But I wasn't done. No, this wasn't just about freezing his funds or watching him squirm at the airport. That was only the first crack in his perfect little world. Now, it was time to rip the foundation out from under him. I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I landed on the one I had labeled Corporate HR, Confidential. I tapped the call button and waited as the line rang. "Good morning, this is Susan," a clipped professional voice answered. "Hi, Susan," I said, my tone smooth, controlled. "I need to report a serious ethical violation regarding an employee at your firm. His name is Nathan Walker." A brief pause. "I see. And what exactly is the nature of this violation?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs, feeling the weight of months of preparation settle into something almost serene. "It involves an inappropriate workplace relationship with a subordinate. I have evidence, photos, receipts, messages, charges to the company card that had nothing to do with business." That last part was the real knife to the throat. Companies didn't care about affairs. But financial misconduct? That was the kind of thing that made HR departments act fast. Susan's voice sharpened. "I assume you're prepared to provide this evidence? I can have it in your inbox within the next hour." Another pause. "We take these matters very seriously." "I'll escalate this immediately." "Good," I said. "You should." I ended the call and opened my email, attaching every last piece of documentation I had been gathering. The dinner dates, the hotel stays, the receipts for extravagant gifts, all of it charged under business expenses. The company might have overlooked the affair, but not the financial fraud. That was a career-ending mistake. Nathan had always been arrogant, so sure he could have everything: a wife to handle the home, a mistress for the excitement, and a company paycheck to fund it all. He never thought for a second that the walls could close in on him. But by the time he got back from the airport, he would find an email waiting for him, one that started with the words, "We need to discuss your recent expenses." I smiled to myself and hit send. Just as I finished, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Evelyn, there's someone here to see you." I frowned. "A customer?" She hesitated. "No, it's Jessica." "Ah." So she was smarter than I gave her credit for. I exhaled, standing up and smoothing out my blouse. "Send her in." Jessica stepped into my office hesitantly, her posture tense. She was dressed far more conservatively than I had ever seen her. Gone were the tight dresses and sky-high heels. Now, she looked like a girl who had just realized she had made a terrible mistake. "Evelyn," she started, voice shaky, "I know I shouldn't be here, but I need to talk to you." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Go ahead." She sat, folding her hands in her lap like a nervous child. "I didn't know. About the money. About what he did to you." I tilted my head. "You didn't?" She shook her head quickly. "Nathan told me you were cold, controlling, that you were holding him back, that he deserved more. And I believed him because I was stupid, because I wanted to." I watched her for a long moment, taking in the way her lower lip trembled slightly, the way she gripped her own hands, like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart. She had been naive, yes, but she was also just another casualty of Nathan's manipulation. "And now?" I asked, my voice neutral. Jessica swallowed hard. "And now I know better. I could have been cruel. I could have dismissed her, told her she got exactly what she deserved. But I didn't, because in some ways she had been just as deceived as I had once been. And more importantly, she wasn't the real enemy here. Let me guess," I said instead. "You realized he doesn't actually have anything to offer, now that he can't use my money to fund his lifestyle?" Her face flushed with shame, but she didn't deny it. He told me we'd have this amazing life in LA. He made it sound like a dream. But today, when everything started falling apart, he just shut down. He started yelling at me, like it was my fault. I didn't react. That, too, was classic Nathan. The moment things stopped going his way, he turned on whoever was closest. "He's a liar," Jessica continued, her voice breaking. "And I was stupid enough to fall for it." I let out a slow breath, watching her closely. "So why are you here?" Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, there was something in them that wasn't arrogance or entitlement. It was regret. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said quietly. "But if there's anything I can do, anything I want to help, I don't want him to get away with this." I leaned back in my chair, considering her. She wasn't lying. That much was clear. And that meant I had an opportunity in front of me, one I hadn't expected, but one that could make Nathan's downfall even more absolute. "All right," I said slowly. "Tell me everything you know." Jessica exhaled in relief, nodding quickly. "Okay." She started talking, and I listened. Every detail, every lie, every mistake Nathan had made in thinking she would be blindly loyal to him. By the time she finished, my plan was complete. Nathan thought today was the worst day of his life. He had no idea what was coming next. I sat in my office, fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, staring out the large glass window at the city below. The sky was clear, the streets alive with movement, business as usual. But for Nathan, his world was collapsing in real time. I could picture him now, pacing in a hotel lobby somewhere, phone pressed to his ear, cursing under his breath as he dialed number after number, trying to salvage what was left of his pride. but there was nothing left to salvage. Not anymore. I reached for my phone, flipping it over to check the latest updates. More missed calls, more voicemails. Nathan was spiraling, each message more unhinged than the last. The first few had been demanding, entitled, as if he still believed he had any power over me. "Evelyn, I swear to God you better fix this. I don't know what you did, but the bank froze my account. I can't access my money. This is illegal. Call me back. Now." Then came the frustration. "You think you're so smart? You think you can just pull this kind of stunt and get away with it? I'll get my money, Evelyn. I don't care what it takes." And finally, the desperation. "Please, please call me. I just need to talk to you." I smiled, setting the phone down. He wasn't getting a response. Not yet. He wasn't nearly desperate enough. A soft knock on my door pulled me from my thoughts. My assistant peeked in, her expression tight with curiosity. "There's someone here asking to see you. He says it's urgent." I arched an eyebrow. "Who?" She hesitated. "It's Nathan's boss." That was unexpected. I straightened, setting my coffee aside. "Send him in." Moments later, a tall man in a crisp navy suit stepped through the door, his expression unreadable. I recognized him immediately, James Calloway, senior executive at Nathan's firm. I had met him at a few company events, exchanged pleasantries, smiled through conversations about quarterly reports. I had no interest in. He had always been polite, but distant. A man who dealt in power plays and corporate politics. And now, he was standing in my office. "Mr. Calloway," I greeted smoothly. What a surprise. He gave a tight nod, adjusting the expensive watch on his wrist before settling into the chair across from me. "Evelyn, I'll get straight to the point." His eyes met mine, sharp and assessing. "I received an anonymous report about Nathan's conduct at the company. A report that included a substantial amount of evidence." I didn't blink. "Is that so?" His lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes. And while I won't ask whether you were involved, I will say this: our internal review team is taking it very seriously." I tilted my head, feigning mild curiosity. "And what exactly does that mean for Nathan?" A beat of silence. Then the slightest smirk touched Calloway's lips. "It means he won't be employed much longer." I exhaled, a slow, measured breath, as if I was simply absorbing the information. Inside, I was reveling in it. Nathan's job was everything to him: his status, his identity, his last grasp at control. And now, it was slipping through his fingers. "That's unfortunate," I said, my voice smooth. "I imagine he won't take the news well." Calloway chuckled, shaking his head. "No, I don't suppose he will. But given the severity of the situation, it's out of my hands." He paused, studying me. "You know, Evelyn, I always wondered how you put up with him." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I don't anymore." His smirk widened slightly. "Good for you." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "Well, I should be going. Just thought you might appreciate the update." I inclined my head. "Thank you for stopping by." He nodded, then hesitated. "One more thing off the record." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "If you ever decide to expand your business, you should give me a call. I have some contacts who'd be very interested." I smiled, the kind of smile that came from knowing I had already won. "I'll keep that in mind." As soon as he left, I let out a slow breath, rolling my shoulders. This was playing out even better than I had anticipated. Nathan wasn't just losing his money, he was losing his entire foundation. His career, his reputation, his future. I reached for my phone again, this time dialing a number I had saved weeks ago. The call rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "I assume this means it's done," my lawyer said, her tone cool and businesslike. "Oh, it's far from done," I murmured, my fingers drumming lightly against my desk. "But the real fun is just beginning." I had always believed in preparation, in knowing my next move before anyone else even realized the game had started. And today, Today was the culmination of every calculated step I had taken. Nathan had always assumed I was passive, someone who would crumble the moment he left, who would sit in silence, mourning the life he had ripped away from me. But that was his mistake. He had underestimated me for the last time. I sat at my desk, my fingers grazing the cool surface, the weight of what was about to happen settling over me like a quiet storm. My phone sat beside me, buzzing intermittently with texts I ignored. Nathan was spiraling, and I wasn't in any hurry to throw him a lifeline. He was the one who had set this fire. I was just making sure he burned in it. The moment I had been waiting for arrived just past noon. An email popped up on my screen, the subject line crisp and damning: "Termination of employment, Nathan Walker." I clicked it open, skimming the formal language: "Be effective immediately. Violation of corporate policies. Breach of ethical conduct. No severance, no benefits. No future in his industry." The words were like music. Every sentence, another nail in the coffin of the life he had so arrogantly built. I reached for my coffee, taking a slow sip as I imagined him receiving the same email, sitting in whatever sad little corner of the city he had retreated to after his failed escape to LA, his heart pounding, his hands shaking, his perfect world crashing down around him. Would he throw his phone? Punch a wall? Blame Jessica? It didn't matter. Nothing he did now could undo what I had set in motion. As if on cue, my phone rang. Nathan. Again. I let it ring once, twice, before finally answering. "What did you do?" His voice was raw, on the edge of something between fury and despair. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs, keeping my tone perfectly even. "I don't know what you mean, Nathan." He exhaled sharply, a ragged breath that told me he was unraveling. "Don't play dumb, Evelyn. My accounts are frozen. My credit is shot. My job." He cut himself off, like even saying the words out loud was too much for him to bear. "They fired me," he finally spat, his voice shaking. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I think you did that to yourself." "You bitch," he seethed. "You think you can just destroy my life and walk away?" I took another sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch between us before answering, my voice smooth as silk. "I didn't destroy your life, Nathan. I just made sure you faced the consequences of your own actions." He laughed, but it wasn't real. It was bitter, hollow. "You think you've won?" I tilted my head slightly, considering his words. "Haven't I?" His breathing was uneven, his mind undoubtedly racing, grasping for any last shred of control. But there was nothing left. He had played his hand too early, too carelessly, and now he was out of moves. "I need money," he said, suddenly his tone shifting, desperate. "You can't just leave me with nothing. We were married for 10 years, Evelyn. You owe me." I almost laughed at the audacity. "I owe you?" He heard the amusement in my voice and snapped. "I gave you everything." That did make me laugh. A real, deep, genuine laugh. "You gave me nothing, Nathan. I built my business without you. I succeeded in spite of you. And while you were busy screwing your little intern, I was making sure you wouldn't take a dime more from me." He let out a shaky breath. "Evelyn, please," he murmured, his voice dropping, trying to sound remorseful, trying to find the version of me who might have once cared. I made a mistake, okay? We don't have to do this." I let the silence stretch. Let him believe for just a second that there was still a way out of this. And then I shattered it. "You already did it, Nathan. You left. You stole from me. You humiliated me. And now you get to live with that choice." He cursed under his breath, the last bit of control slipping through his fingers. "You won't get away with this." I smirked, tilting my head toward the window, watching the city move around me, watching the world continue without him. "I already have." I hung up, setting my phone down gently on the desk, exhaling slowly. That was it. That was the moment he realized it was over. Nathan Walker had spent his entire life believing he was untouchable, that he could cheat, lie, manipulate his way through anything. But not this time. This time, he had lost. And I had never been stronger. I reached for my laptop, opening my next email. The future was waiting, and for the first time in years, it was mine to write. I stared at my phone, watching as another call from Nathan flashed across the screen. I let it ring, 5 times, then 6, before it finally stopped. A voicemail notification popped up. I didn't need to listen to it to know exactly what it said. He had been unraveling all day, each new reality hitting him like a brick to the face. First, the canceled flights, then the frozen accounts. And now, the cherry on top, he was unemployed. I could almost see him now, standing in whatever dingy hotel lobby he had managed to check into, his face red with frustration, his voice low and dangerous as he tried to demand answers from people who no longer owed him anything. But no one was listening anymore. I took a slow sip of wine, letting the rich taste settle on my tongue before swallowing. The sun was setting outside my window, casting a golden glow over the city skyline. It was beautiful, peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos Nathan was experiencing at this very moment. And I savored that, every second of it. Another message came through, this time a text. Nathan, Evelyn, we need to talk. Call me back, now. I smirked. He was still trying to control the narrative, still pretending he had some kind of leverage over me. That was the thing about men like Nathan. They never believed they could actually lose until they were already drowning. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Nathan, you don't get to do this to me. You think you're so smart? You won't win. Oh, but I already had. A moment later, a new email popped up on my laptop. It was from my lawyer. Subject, finalized divorce settlement and legal actions. I clicked it open, my eyes scanning the perfectly worded document. My lawyer had been thorough, ensuring that Nathan had no loopholes to escape through. His fraudulent transactions, his misuse of our joint accounts, his blatant financial misconduct, it was all neatly laid out, undeniable. He had burned himself. All I had done was light the match. At the very bottom of the email was a single line that made my chest tighten with satisfaction. All claims against your business have been dismissed. You retain full ownership and control. I let out a slow breath, leaning back into my chair. That had been Nathan's last desperate attempt to stake a claim in something he had never built, never valued, just so he could walk away with something. But he had lost, completely. And now, he had nothing. The phone rang again. This time I answered. Well, I said smoothly, I was wondering how long it would take you to try again. There was silence on the other end, just the sound of his heavy breathing. And then, you think this is funny? I tilted my head, swirling the wine in my glass. A little bit, yeah. You ruined my life, Evelyn. His voice was lower now, raw, desperate in a way I had never heard before. I lost my job. My credit is destroyed. I have nothing left. I sighed, letting the weight of his words settle in. You did that to yourself, Nathan. You made this choice. A bitter laugh escaped him. I made one mistake. I clenched my jaw. One mistake? I echoed, my voice turning sharp. Was it one mistake when you drained our joint account? Or was it when you took my money to fund a life with your mistress? Maybe it was when you laughed at me in that text, thinking you had won. He didn't respond, because he knew. I continued, my tone softer now, almost pitying. You never thought I'd fight back, did you? His breathing was uneven, erratic. I just thought. You thought I'd cry. You thought I'd beg, I said, finishing his sentence for him. You thought I'd be weak. Silence stretched between us. You don't understand, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't have anywhere to go. That was the moment I realized it. He wasn't angry anymore. He was afraid, truly afraid. And for a brief second, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not regret, not sympathy, just closure. I closed my eyes, taking in the moment. Nathan had always been a man who thought he was invincible, untouchable. He had walked through life believing he could cheat and manipulate his way out of anything. But now he had been stripped bare. No money, no power, no escape. He had destroyed himself. And I was finally free. I let out a breath, opening my eyes. My voice calm, steady. Goodbye, Nathan. And then, without another word, I hung up. I stared at my phone for a long moment before finally turning it off. No more calls, no more texts, no more Nathan. I picked up my wine glass and walked toward the balcony, stepping into the cool night air. The city stretched out in front of me, vibrant and alive. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. I had won. And this was just the beginning. I stepped out onto my balcony, letting the night air wrap around me like a silk sheet. The city was alive, glowing in the distance, bustling with the sounds of late-night conversations, cars humming along the streets, and the occasional burst of laughter from the bar down the block. I breathed it all in, feeling the weight of everything finally lifting off my shoulders. The last of Nathan's calls had gone unanswered, his voicemails left unheard, his desperate texts ignored. For the first time in what felt like forever, he was gone. I leaned against the railing, the cool metal pressing into my palms, and let my mind drift back over the past few months. Every move I had made, every decision I had calculated, had led to this moment. I had torn down the man who had once torn me apart. I had watched as he crumbled under the weight of his own arrogance. His job? Gone. His credit? Ruined. His reputation? In shambles. And now, he was exactly where he had tried to leave me with nothing. But the difference between us? I had rebuilt myself. Nathan? He had never known how to survive without someone else holding him up. I took a sip from my wine glass, letting the bitterness settle on my tongue. I had spent so much time planning, preparing, fighting, and now that it was over, now that he was truly out of my life, I found myself standing at the edge of something unfamiliar. Freedom. The thought of it sent a thrill through me, sharp and electric. I had spent years in that marriage walking on eggshells, second-guessing myself, making my life smaller just to accommodate him. I had given so much, only to have him turn around and decide that he deserved more. And now I was done shrinking myself for anyone. I turned, stepping back inside my apartment, my space, untouched by him, filled only with things I loved. The soft scent of vanilla and amber from the candle burning on my coffee table, the sleek black furniture that I had chosen, the framed photo of my boutique's grand opening, the life that I had built without him. I walked to my desk, where my laptop was still open, the glow of the screen casting soft light against the room. My inbox was filled with unread messages, mostly from clients, business contacts, friends who had heard whispers of what had happened and were reaching out. But one email caught my attention. Subject, business expansion proposal. I clicked it open, scanning the contents. It was from a well-known investor, a woman I had met briefly at a networking event months ago. She had been impressed with my boutique, had seen the way it was growing, and now she wanted to talk about expansion. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. The next step. The real next step. Nathan had spent years belittling my business, calling it my little shop, treating it like a hobby instead of the thriving empire I had built from the ground up. But now, while he was floundering, begging, barely surviving, I was about to take everything I had worked for and make it bigger. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. This was what winning felt like. Not revenge, not just taking him down, building something bigger in the aftermath. I tapped my fingers against the desk, staring at the email, considering. And then, just as I was about to respond, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. And then, against my better judgment, I answered. Hello? A beat of silence. And then, Evelyn? It wasn't Nathan. It was his sister, Amanda. I frowned, sitting up straighter. Amanda? She exhaled heavily, like she had been holding her breath. I know I probably shouldn't be calling, but I didn't know who else to talk to. Something about her tone made my stomach tighten. What's wrong? She let out a shaky laugh. You really have to ask? I sighed, rubbing my temple. Is this about Nathan? Of course it's about Nathan. Her voice was tight, frustrated. He's falling apart, Evelyn. He showed up at my place last night, drunk, ranting about how you ruined him. He's got nowhere to go. He's burning through whatever cash he has left. And Mom, she cut herself off, then sighed. Mom's still making excuses for him, still acting like he's the victim in all of this. Of course she was. Margaret had always coddled him, always believed that her son could do no wrong. Even when he failed, even when he lied, even when he made a mess of everything, there was always someone else to blame. I pressed my lips together, waiting. I'm not calling to ask you for anything, Amanda said after a pause. I needed to tell you that I see it now. Everything you went through, everything he did. I defended him for so long, and I was wrong. I sat there, taking in her words. Amanda had never been cruel to me. But she'd always believed Nathan's version of the story, that I was the cold wife who had stopped loving him, the woman who had never appreciated him. But now that he had no one left to manipulate, no one left to deceive, she was seeing him for who he really was. I didn't speak for a long moment. And then, finally, I said, I appreciate you telling me that. She let out a slow breath. I don't know what's going to happen to him. I closed my eyes. That's not my problem anymore. And I meant it. Nathan's choices, his downfall, his complete and utter collapse, none of it had anything to do with me anymore. He was just a man I used to know, a man who had once held power over me and now had none. Amanda didn't argue. She just whispered, "Take care of yourself, Evelyn. You too," I murmured. And then, just like that, the last tie to Nathan was cut. I hung up, staring at my phone for a long moment before finally placing it face down on the desk. I would take care of myself. I would take the meeting with the investor. I would expand my business. I would wake up tomorrow and keep moving forward without the weight of my past dragging me down. Because this life, this freedom was mine. And for the first time in years, I was going to live it exactly the way I wanted to. I stood in my office, staring at my phone, watching the seconds tick by as the call ended. Amanda was gone. Nathan was gone. And for the first time in years, I felt an almost deafening silence settle over my world. It wasn't a bad silence. It wasn't loneliness. It was peace. Real, unshakable peace. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the city spread before me. Everything looked different now. Not because the world had changed, but because I had changed. I had spent so many years trapped, suffocated in a life that was never truly mine, constantly second-guessing myself, constantly shrinking just to make room for Nathan's ego. But now I was finally standing on my own, and the view was breathtaking. I ran my fingers along the edge of my desk, the surface cool and solid beneath my touch, grounding me. The laptop screen was still glowing, the expansion proposal waiting for my response. It was funny. In a way, Nathan had spent years belittling my business, dismissing it, acting like it was just a little hobby to keep me occupied while he played the role of the big shot husband. But while he had spent his time sneaking around, wasting money, destroying himself, I had been building something real, something lasting. And now, that little hobby was about to turn into an empire. I took a slow breath and clicked reply. Let's set up a meeting. I'm ready to talk expansion. And just like that, I closed the chapter of my past and stepped into my future. But that wasn't the end of it. The universe, it seemed, still had one final twist left in store. I had barely finished sending the email when my assistant knocked on the door, peeking her head in hesitantly. "Evelyn, there's someone downstairs asking to see you." I glanced up. "A client?" She shifted uncomfortably. "No, it's Nathan." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. Then the realization settled in, slow and heavy. "Nathan, here." I let out a quiet breath, adjusting my posture, feeling that familiar steel settle in my spine. I had assumed he would try to reach me one last time, but showing up at my boutique? That was desperate, even for him. "Did he say what he wants?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She hesitated. He looks bad, Evelyn. He said he just needs 5 minutes of your time." I stared at her, my expression unreadable. I had no reason to see him, no obligation. But maybe I wanted to. Not because I owed him anything, not because I cared, but because after everything, after his betrayal, his arrogance, his absolute certainty that I would crumble without him, I wanted to see what he had become. "Send him up," I said finally. A few minutes later, the elevator chimed, and then there he was, standing in the doorway of my office. And God, he looked nothing like the man I used to know. Nathan had always carried himself with an air of casual confidence, an easy arrogance, like the world would always bend in his favor. But now he looked hollow. The sharp suits, the polished shoes, the cocky smirk all gone. His face was unshaven, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes sunken with exhaustion. He looked like a man who had lost everything, because he had. I folded my arms across my chest, tilting my head slightly. "I have a meeting in 15 minutes, so whatever this is, make it quick." He swallowed hard, shifting awkwardly on his feet. I needed to see you." I raised an eyebrow. "Why?" He let out a breath, rubbing a hand over his face. "Because I don't know where else to go." I almost laughed. After everything, this was his rock bottom? Coming back to me, expecting what, pity? A second chance? An ounce of forgiveness? "That's not my problem," I said simply. He flinched, his jaw tightening. "Evelyn, please." His voice cracked slightly, the desperation creeping in. "I lost everything." I let out a slow exhale, shaking my head. "No, Nathan. You threw everything away. That's different." His hands clenched at his sides, his breathing uneven. "I know I messed up. I know I was a terrible husband." I cut him off with a sharp laugh. "Oh, we're way past terrible, Nathan." His mouth opened, then closed. I don't know what to do. I studied him for a long moment. The man who had once thought he was unstoppable, untouchable, now standing in front of me, lost, broken. And the most ironic part? This was exactly what he had wanted for me. He had left, believing I would be the one crumbling, the one begging. But now, he was the one standing here, pleading for help. And I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no satisfaction, just emptiness. "I think," I said slowly, carefully, "that for the first time in your life, you're going to have to figure that out on your own." His face twisted, his hands shaking slightly. "Evelyn," I held up a hand, stopping him. "No, Nathan, you don't get to ask me for anything. Not after what you did. Not after you stole from me, cheated on me, laughed at me like I was nothing." He exhaled sharply, looking down. "I wasn't thinking. You never were," I said, cutting him off again. "You never thought beyond your own selfish desires. And now, you're facing the consequences. So live with them." The silence that followed was suffocating. He had nothing left to say, because for the first time in his life, there was nothing he could say to fix this. No excuse, no manipulation, no charming lie that could undo what he had done. After a long moment, he nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I guess this is it, then." "It was over a long time ago, Nathan," I said quietly. He turned, walking slowly to the door, pausing for just a second before stepping out. And just like that, he was gone. I let out a breath I hadn't even realized I was holding, feeling lighter than I ever had before. I walked back to my desk, sitting down and pulling my laptop closer. The investor meeting was in an hour. My future was waiting. I had spent so much time thinking this moment, seeing Nathan fall, watching him face the wreckage of his own choices would feel like victory. But now that it had happened, I realized something. My victory had never been about him. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about watching him suffer. It was about me, about moving on, about reclaiming my life, about building something better, stronger without him. And so, I did. I clicked send on my email, confirming the meeting. Then I picked up my phone, called my assistant, and said, "Let's get to work," because Nathan was my past, and I was just getting started. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: protect yourself. Emotionally, financially, legally. Love is not an excuse for blindness, and trust without accountability is a dangerous game. I built my life, my success, my security, and I let someone else believe they could take it from me. Never again. In America, independence isn't just a privilege, it's survival. Keep records. Know your rights. Never put your future in someone else's hands. And when the time comes, walk away with your dignity intact. Revenge isn't the goal, success is. Because nothing hurts a betrayer more than watching you thrive without them. So, after everything, was this karma or was it just the beginning? Nathan thought he was in control, but in the end, he was the one left with nothing. No money, no job, no reputation. He thought I would be the one begging, but look at him now. Lost, alone, powerless. But here's the real question: do you think he truly learned his lesson? Or will he try to crawl his way back, looking for another victim? Comment lesson learned if you think he's finally paying for his mistakes, or once a cheater if you think he'll never change.